This is 93.5 CHMR FM.
You're listening to Transparency with your host, me, Steve Finn. Our guest tonight is Andy Jones. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is Steve Finn with Transparency on 93.5 CHMR Radio. We have an excellent show for you today. My guest tonight is the esteemed performer, Andy Jones. I gotta say, I am absolutely starstruck to have him in the studio. He has been an inspiration for me since I was a wee lad. I used to watch Codco growing up in my grandparents' house at the age of 10 or so, and it's a dream come true. When I first conceived this show, Andy Jones was the first guest I had in mind. So I'm absolutely thrilled that he's agreed to come on with me. So we're going to be hearing from him. You would know him from, first of all, from the sketch show back in the 80s, Codco. Aside from that, he was in the 2001 film Rare Birds. He also actually wrote and directed and starred in the very first feature-length film fully produced here in Newfoundland. That's The Adventure of Faustus Bidgood. And you would also know most recently from the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical Carousel, which was produced here just a couple of weeks ago. So he'll be in the studio talking to me. Just to let you know, we have some online presence. You can check us out on Twitter at Transparency935, or check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/transparencychmr. And if you had any comments, questions, anything like that, send us a quick email. The email address is transparencychmr@gmail.com. Also, we'll be showcasing a band from Toronto. These guys are called Champion Lover. Now, you could describe them as, I guess, a noise punk band. I've known these guys for a while. We used to play a couple of shows themselves in my old band, Another City, and they're a great group of guys. The roster's as follows: Ted Masuda on guitars and vocals, his brother Bill Masuda, that's right, Bill and Ted, he's on guitar, and also Eric Toker on drums, and of course James Kane on not the bass guitar, but the big guitar, as it's called. He's the first guy I know to play such an instrument, but it's pretty interesting what he does with that. Now, they've been on the scene for a good while, and we'll be listening to some tracks from their debut record, self-titled, Champion Lover. And it's great to have them as our featured band tonight. So we'll get started with the first track from them, Read My Mind. And this is a great record from start to finish, so I strongly suggest you pick them up. Go to championlover.ca and learn more about them. Got to give a personal shout-out to James Kane. He produced my band's demo way back in the day when we first got started. That band was Another City. So he's been very instrumental in showing us the ropes of performing on the Toronto circuit and recording and all that. So you know what, I owe it to these guys to have them featured on the show. So without further ado, we'll get to that first track. Here is Read My Mind by Champion Lover here on Transparency with Steve Finn.
disappearing actor, still illusion. Why can't you be my man? Why can't you be my man? Left here, I can reach you. The next conventions are representing our events. I feel you. Deferential on your purchased advance. Why can't you be my man? I can't be your
All right, that was Read My Mind by Champion Lover, our featured band this evening. Hope you enjoy that. And now for the main event, folks, we have the esteemed writer, director, performer, children's book author Andy Jones in the studio. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Steve.
Welcome to CHMR. You've been here a couple of times before.
I
think.
have. Yep.
Well, welcome back. I got to say, it's a thrill to have you here. When I first thought of doing a show here at CHMR, you were my very first idea as a guest to have.
Oh, great. I'm glad.
And, you know, my original plan was to get a few episodes under my belt and get good at this before I have, you know, a big star like yourself. But, you know, I was just too eager to get you in.
That's great. Well, I'm glad to be here.
Yes, and I'm glad as well. So you just finished up performing at the show Carousel. It's a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical.
That's right.
And that was done with Opera on the Avalon.
Yep.
And I did get a chance to see it. I was a little busy. How was the audience reaction to that? How was the reception?
Oh, you didn't get a chance. It was good. The people really liked it. I must say, it went over very well. And as you can imagine, I was doing a non-singing role.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I don't sing, and at all. And but you know, the young opera professionals who take part in that event every year are, you know, very, very, very skilled and very inspired, some of them, and accomplished for they tend to be a bit young, so they're very accomplished for their age. And I guess it's, you know, like, I don't hang around opera or don't know much about opera, but when you hear these guys sing, and you know, they're just like, they look like you, or you know, my kids, and you sort of think you see their kids hanging around outside of the bars downtown, but boy, when they sing, oh my God, their voices are just incredible. And it goes through you. I mean, to be in the presence of somebody who sings like that, it vibrates in your body, you know, and it's a thrill.
I can imagine. Is that the first time you've worked with Opera on the Avalon?
No, it's the second time, and I got to do another opera 4 years ago called Gianni Schicchi by Puccini, and my God, I just had a great time doing that. Again, the same thing. It's like I'm lying in a bed. Actually, I played the dead guy in that. I didn't sing, and actually, I got to die during the overture, and then I had
the overture.
Yeah, my death scene is at the very, very top of the show, and then they start carting my body around and throwing it around, and it's part of the plot where they pretend the guy hasn't died, and someone else gets in the bed and he rewrites his will, as if he's the guy who's died, right? Because the will is not in favor of the people of his family, right? And it's a great plot, actually, and very, very funny. It's a really funny opera. And but I got to be, there in that bed with all these incredible singers singing around me. It was a thrill, I got to say.
I find it interesting that your death occurs in the overture.
Yeah.
I've seen a few musicals. I've never heard of any plot points happening at that point in the musical before anything even starts.
Well, actually, I think in the original, does he actually die in the original, or did they just give me that chance to have a little death scene? I think he might already be dead at the beginning of the actual opera.
Okay.
Yeah. So they gave me that little extra, like 10 seconds. I could do a ridiculous comedy death, right? So
I can see you pulling that off.
Oh, it was great. Oh, I had so much fun. And then they decide to stuff him in a closet, and close the door, and then somebody else gets in the bed and pretends to be him, and then they call the lawyers in to rewrite the will. And they're so respectful, they don't go too near the bed. And they also indicate that he might be sick, so they shouldn't go too near. And so the other guy rewrites the will.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great story. Yeah.
Sounds like it. So that's what's been happening more recently.
Yep.
I wanted to get back to the roots. You were a member of Codco.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
That wasn't yesterday.
No, it wasn't. It was a couple of days ago.
Yeah, just maybe a week. It started out as the show Cod on a Stick. And
Yes.
You weren't part of it in the beginning. I think
Nope.
I think you maybe a year later or so
Yep.
you were. How did you get involved with that? I know your sister Kathy was a part.
Well, we were very close anyway. We had been on tour, myself and Tommy Sexton and Diane Olson and Mary Walsh were on tour together, and Bob Joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all met in 1972 on the very, very first tour that any of us did, our first professional gig with a group called the Newfoundland Traveling Theatre Company. And we got together, and so we talked about doing a show. And then Greg Malone, of course, had been my best friend since I was in grade. Well, we went to school together in 1954.
Wow.
So we were very close for all those years. And Kathy was my sister. So then I went to England with a group there, and they went to Toronto, and they started the company. And then they asked me to come back, and I said, I can't. I'm committed here, right?
Right.
But then a year later, I went and saw them and said, "Oh my God, please let me join." So they said, "Okay, you can join, and let's do another show." So we wrote the second show, which was called "Sickness, Death, and Beyond the Grave."
Right. So you got your wish, and you got in there.
I got my wish. Be
yes.
careful what you wish for.
Now, you folks, the Codco crew, they took some time off. You all did, your own thing. Of
Yeah.
course, you were working together on other projects.
Well, we really only lasted as a theater company. Well, they started in '73. In October '73 was the first show, and by pretty well November of '76, we split up. There was really a 3-year gig together, and we wrote those 5 major shows, in our terms, major shows, and they're all sketch comedy. And then it wasn't until 1985, 9 years later, that we got together to do the television series. And we stayed together from 86, I guess, really was when we started to write, 86 to 92. Yeah.
Right. And when that show was getting started, Bob Joy and Diane Olson, they weren't as involved.
With the TV show, they were not involved at all.
They weren't?
Nope.
Okay.
No, except we used some of their material, so they were co-writers.
They were credited as writers.
Oh yes, absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always interested in learning about how the writing process works for these sketch shows because, when you're watching the sketches, there's no credit on who wrote what specific sketch.
Right.
You don't really get a sense of that dynamic. So,
No.
how did did you write in pairs or was it a collaborative effort or?
We wrote every kind of way you can think of in terms of pairing or whatever like that. But basically what we did in this, if I could sum up, I think I'd be fairly accurate to say we sat around and talked. So we would get together, more or less around a certain time, and that we didn't always show up on time. And we would begin to just talk and basically talk foolishness, as many funny things as we could think about, and talk about teachers we had in school and stuff, and just we would grouse about the world and complain about the world and say, this happened to me yesterday and I went down there and I went to the bar and this guy said this to me, and just like, and then, but we were always writing things down, and we'd say, hey, put that in the book, Okay. And so someone would say, and then eventually we would say, oh my God, we have a show in 2 months, we better start writing some of this down into a sketch. And sometimes, like I can remember writing Father Din on Sin, that first piece that I wrote for Father Din, and I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she told me something about what a priest said to her. I went out to supper, and in the back of a napkin or a placemat, I wrote that first piece, and I still have that serviette actually, or that placemat, and so that just came out. So I walked in with that and said, "Here, here's a character," and then Tommy and Kathy and then became the altar boys, and I was given the sermon. But and sometimes, like Greg Malone, who knew me very well, would say to me, "Why don't you do that guy you used to do in high school?"
Oh,
you know what I mean? And I'd say, I said, well, that can't really fit in here. He'd say, oh yeah, let's try it. And then Greg was very, very, very good at encouraging me always. He's such a very important person in terms of my life. Oh, there goes my phone. Sorry. So he would say, do that character you used to in high school and stick him in to the middle of this sketch to be that guy who does this. And then, of course, that would end up expanding until that became a character. And then that would become, God knows, that could be one of my major characters after that.
Was that one of your favorites to do on the show, that character?
That guy was the guy. He was based on a minister, a Protestant minister in St. John's, who I didn't even know, but I just used to hear his name. And I used to do this character, but I turned him into the Reverend Dempster Peebles, who actually ends up in Faustus Bidgood too.
Okay.
And he was in this musical called Bernie Snellgrove Superstar, and but so I mean, it's very difficult to say, except that we made each other laugh. And if we laughed, then we figured it probably is funny to other people, and then we always wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
We always wrote it down, and then we did work pretty strictly on it. And by the time we got on stage, we were very strictly scripted. People don't know that. People think, oh, you made it up, but we didn't. It was really, now things would happen in performance, that you'd add something, and then you'd write, and you'd say,
right.
like, well, what did I say? And they say, no, I didn't say that. And then you go back and get it exactly right. Just like stand-up comics, everyone who writes comedy really, they're being very, very specific about, exactly the timing and the number of words and the way you say it.
Yeah.
So we were very careful about that, but it always started off with something that made us laugh. And that's the way we work. And I sort of gathered, I went to work with Kids in the Hall eventually, and although they were kind of at the end of their time together, it seemed like they more or less worked that way, although they tended to go off more in pairs. And
right, because Mark and Bruce would write together, David and Kevin would write together, I think. So yeah, they were paired off.
They did a bit. There was a bit more like that, yeah. So actually, I found that difficult because there was no place to go. Where we all wrote together. Although there was a place, we had an actual room, and all the writers had their own desks there and stuff like that. And but that didn't happen, and so that was different than Codco.
Was it a challenge to join a show that's already been established as opposed to being with Codco in its infancy? That was an added challenge, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. No. I mean, the fact of the matter is, although the Kids in the Hall were very, very, very kind to me, and they paid me well and had a really good year, but, I think I had maybe one sketch that I wrote, which I didn't like very much, and I wrote some of the stuff for their very last episode, some ideas.
Okay.
But the fact is that, they just didn't, my material didn't, they're very different comedians than we were too, right? And in kind of ways, like they were just like giving me this little sort of grant and say, you're an older comedian, come aboard and we'll pay you for a while.
That's interesting because you were often compared. I think they had the block right after yours on television. You both did the dressing and drag thing. Yep. That I guess came from Monty Python. But you, like you're saying, I guess that's where the similarities end.
Well, they really had a much more kind of almost absurd style. Like I remember writing something one time, and somebody in the Kids in the Hall, I forget who it was, said, "Oh no, that's an ending. We don't want an ending."
Oh,
you know what I mean? And like we tended to write things that were sort of sewn up at the end. They had a beginning, middle, and an end, and then they had like a little joke at the end.
And they leave things more
open.
And
they left it open.
Yeah.
They were much more postmodern than we were.
So that was some getting used to for you.
Definitely.
Now, you were noticeably absent from that final season of Codco.
Yes. Yeah,
I believe that was over a censorship dispute. What happened there?
Well, I wrote a sketch called Pleasant Irish Priests in Conversation. Actually, you can get it online.
Oh, yeah?
Somebody always seems to have it up, although the company keeps shutting it down. And it was pretty raw and raucous piece. Have you ever seen
controversial.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but I know what it entails.
Yeah. If you Google that, you'll probably get it. And so anyway, they wouldn't show it, and it was right at the time Mount Cashel was being was just for the first bunch of the inquiry was over, and so I really thought this should be out there. I really felt it was, and they said they didn't. So anyway, we disagreed, and I left.
Okay,
but they actually put it on a year later anyway.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think this is a good time to get to the next song.
Okay.
We're showcasing Champion Lover in the studio today. They're, as I said, a indie band from Toronto that are up and coming. So this track is called Shooter off their self-titled release, Champion Lover. And here it is on CHMR 93.5.
Stay a while at your perils.
best friends are trustworthy, reliable, loyal, giving, helpful, protective, always there when you need them. Medical Alert membership protects you 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world. For member information, call 1-800-668-1507. Your best friend in a medical emergency.
Hi, this is Elaine Kilpatrick. You're listening to CHMR 93.5 FM.
All right, that was Shooter by Champion Lover here on Transparency with Steve Finn on CHMR 93.5. We are back with our guest this evening, Andy Jones. Again, thank you for coming in, Andy.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's fun.
Yes, I'm having fun as well. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about Rare Birds, your film from back in 2001, also starring William Hurt. And, I just rewatched it recently, knowing that you were coming in, and I enjoyed it just as much, if not more, the second time around. You were absolutely outstanding as Alphonse Murphy. And, that role was so perfect for you and your sensibilities. Yep. Were you the first choice for that role? Or
I don't know, but it's true that, that was one of the best roles I ever had in my life. There's no doubt about it. It's brilliantly written. It's Edward Rich is the writer. And I like everything Ed writes. Like I've done other things that he can write, and I can do his whatever he writes. I like the style of it. And but I don't know but I just know that the director wanted me for that part, and I didn't think that I could do that part because I pictured him looking very different and being very different. So
really,
he said to me when he said to me first that he wanted me to read, I thought he meant the other character, the one that William Hurt played. I said, "You mean Dave?" And he said, "No, for Fonz." I thought, oh, gee, I never thought of myself, because I read the book and I loved the book, just loved it, right? But anyway, he convinced me. And then I went over the thing, and I couldn't quite get the, actually I was sort of interested in whether he had that sort of like West Country Newfoundland accent or like Irish Newfoundland accent.
Right.
When Ed kind of wrote him in that sort of Irish, Newfoundland accent, and so I went to Ed actually and said, "Like, what do you think if I kind of switched?" And Ed said, "Yes, boy, as far as I'm concerned, whatever works." So I went back, and thank God I did.
Yeah. Well, you have that freedom in adaptation to reimagine a character.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an age difference. Sometimes it's a different dialect.
Yeah, and they were pretty good about that too. So anyway, it's just like one of those lucky things that come along in your career. That man.
Right, and you mentioned the director. That director was Sturla Gunnarsson.
Right.
He's from Iceland originally, but is an accomplished Canadian filmmaker.
That's right. Yeah.
How was he on set? Was he fun to work with?
Yes. And he. Like, I like to talk to the director about what we're doing a lot. Like, not every director wants to do that. Not every actor wants to do that. But I love that. So actually, and William Hurt also is like that. And, he talks a lot. And so every morning, actually, when that movie, we used to get together in William Hurt's trailer every morning, and we discussed that day's script. And, and it was just great. I love doing that. And William Hurt has loads of ideas. He's a pretty experienced Hollywood guy.
Yes,
He'd done at that point, 40 feature films, I think. So, he had lots of good advice, and, I really enjoyed that process. And Sturla was just amazing. He's a wonderful fellow.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Mary Walsh's one-woman show, Dancing with Rage.
Yep.
You were the director on this production.
Well, really, I was the second director. Like it had already been brought together by another director, and then Mary brought me in, for her when she started to tour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I
So
remember passing through Toronto at the Panasonic Theatre.
Yep. And so, I mean, I didn't, I wasn't the person who conceived that the direction of that show. But I helped her after the fact and helped her to adjust the show in ways that she wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because, she wrote it herself. Is that a challenge to direct a performer who is also the author of the material that's being performed?
No, I think that's an advantage, really, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that about, I think maybe 10 times now. I did Johnny Harris's first show was called Out of the Bog.
Okay.
And I did John Taylor's show, My Three Dads, and Mary's show, and Kathy Jones's show called Wedding in Texas, which was really a lot of fun, and it was her one-woman show. And so I've actually had a fair bit of experience. It's one of the few things I can say I have, a lot of experience in. And I must say, it's really great to be able to work with a comedian who is able to write, on the spur of the moment and say, well, hey, we got a problem here like that, so go home and write this.
Right.
It's a nice, and also, you can help out with the writing sometimes, or just animate the writing a bit, right?
Right.
Although most of the people I've worked with, man, they're pretty well ready to go when they get there, writing was.
I guess so. Okay. Yeah, I makes sense that that Mary would want to work with you on this. I mean, the material in that show is a little more personal for her. There's subjects on alcohol abuse, which is something she struggled with. Is that a reason that you were working with her on that, since you have a close relationship?
I think that's true. That's why Mary wanted me to come and work with her. And we have been very close friends really since 1972 when we did that first show that summer. First time I ever met Mary, and so. We've been through lots of struggles together, and
right.
So I do have an understanding for that. And I think it's like when you really respect somebody as a comedian too, right? It's great to work with them. I guess a lot of it comes down to I find you funny, you find me funny, and so we like to hang out together. That's a lot of my life has been that, really. Right. And luckily. For some reason or other, we can translate that into making a living, which is the wonderful thing about being in the arts and being in comedy and stuff like that. We're very, very, very fortunate to be able to do this and make something of a living. We don't do as well as dentists.
Well, maybe not. So that's interesting stuff. Maybe we'll just cut back to another song, sure. And we'll be right back with you, Andy. Here's another track from Champion Lover here on Transparency with Steve Finn on CHMR. This one is called Bad Day.
Television.
Tune in Monday nights on 93.5 CHMR. My name is Jake Hunter. I had a show called Voodoo Highway. Play a lot of punk, metal, rock and roll, pop, whatever I want to play. So tune in for the best in rock and roll.
The Placentia Institute of Newfoundland Studies invites you to help compile the region's heritage by sharing your old photographs. They're looking for photos of people, places, and events, or any treasures you can find. Areas of interest are the islands of Placentia Bay, Branch to Petite Fort, and all places in between. For more info, please contact Anita O'Keefe at 709-227-2151, extension 243, or email culturaloffice@placentia.ca. This announcement has been a public service of 93.5 CHMR FM.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. I feel fine.
93.5 CHMR FM, because it might be your last day.
And that was Bad Day by our featured band, Champion Lover. This is Steve Finn, your host of Transparency on CHMR 93.5. If you're just tuning in, we are chatting with Andy Jones, the esteemed performer / director / writer. And Andy, I hope you're having fun so far.
It's great. Yeah, it's fun to go over all this stuff again.
Yeah, blast from the past.
Yeah.
So you've spawned another generation of a performer. Miss Martha Bernard is your daughter.
That's right. Yep.
And I know her. I've seen her around. She's a friend of mine. I think, was she living in Vancouver now?
She is in Vancouver right now. Yep.
And people listening, they would know her from Republic of Doyle. She was a regular character on that. She was also the titular character in Mary Walsh's film Young Triffy Has Been Made Away With.
You're right. She was the corpse.
She was the corpse. And she appeared in some flashbacks as well.
That's right. You're right. She did. That's right.
Yeah. So she's done some great work. And obviously she's had a wealth of knowledge growing up in her dad, yourself, that is. Yeah. So what advice? What kind of advice did you have for her when she started acting? Or did you give her any?
I guess it was, don't do this. I don't know particularly. You know, I always think of really is just to commit. You know, that's the only thing I always say. That's a big part of performing, is really to commit. Mm-hmm. Be that character for that time if you possibly can. You know, you can't always do it, but and just be there in the moment and try to, you know, I don't know. I always think that every single thing that you do should be, you know, you should treat it like it's the biggest thing you're ever going to do.
Yeah.
And work really hard to make it the best it can be. And you can't always make it, and you know, and what you do is probably not that important anyway,
right,
for the most part. But that doesn't matter. You still got to treat it like it is.
Yeah, and it's important to commit, you know, in that moment, because you know the moment is all you have, especially with film and television. Once it's in the can, there's no going back. There's no
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't tweak it. So you really gotta be at the top of your game.
You got to be there for the moment, right? You know, and it's just like, and then you're lucky if you get good people to work with sometimes, and lucky to get people who will let you do it again if you don't, or you're not happy with it.
Right.
Yep.
So you got a few shows that are available for booking. I have a little cousin. His name is Jack, and he had seen your puppet show. I think it's called The Queen of Paradise Garden.
Yep.
What's that show about?
Well, that's a little tiny 35-minute puppet show with tiny little puppets that are only about a foot high or less, and and they all have sort of sticks. They have like sticks in their back that you can move them around. And there's a puppeteer, and myself as a storyteller, and there's a musician. And really, it's a very, very old folktale, and which ended up in Newfoundland, and was told and collected by Herbert Halpert and John Widdowson for their book Folktales of Newfoundland. It was told by a man named Albert Heber Keeping from Grand Bank. And he said he heard it from a guy named Billy Kwan from Sagona Island, and God knows where he heard it, and it just went around the world. And so we adapted it and did it and made it into a puppet show. We had a puppeteer who was living in Newfoundland at the time from Slovenia. Her name was Darka Erdelyi, and she was married to a Newfoundland guy from CBS, Jason Smith.
Okay.
And so we, got to know each other and started working on this idea. And in 2006, I think it was, or 2008, I can't remember, we finished the show. So it's just a little, it's one of those standard stories where someone has to go to the end of the world to find something to cure someone. In this case, it's the parents are very, very old, and they hear about this special fruit that grows that will make the old young again, and it's in the Queen of Paradise's garden, which is 3 miles this side of the end of the world. And I just did another script a couple of weeks ago, finished up for the Lantern Festival. It's called A Bottle of World's End Water, and it's the same story that the king is dying, and his 3 sons go off, try to find the bottle of World's End Water, which will cure him.
Wow.
So it's the same story.
That's really interesting.
Yep.
There's another show I wanted to bring up. It's called An Evening with Uncle Val. This one's available for booking as well. Is this a different show from Letters from Uncle Val?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
This is a newer one.
Well, it uses most of the stuff that's from Letters of Uncle Val, plus other stuff, but doesn't have all the letters in there. It has bits and pieces of things, but it's also a kind of it was for me. I wanted it to be about what was the process that we were going through in the 70s and 80s in terms of our look at Newfoundland culture.
Right.
And I really wanted to analyze what I think we were thinking about.
Right. And Uncle Val is a great vessel to show this because he's a fisherman from rural Newfoundland who's moved to the city.
That's right.
That's his background, right?
Right. And so because I don't know anything about being a fisherman or being from a rural part of Newfoundland, I had him write about St. John's. So it's almost all about St. John's. Because it's his take on St. John's because he's not from there, and so he has that advantage of being able to be on the outside. But I did luckily have a really good friend who was a fisherman from Job's Cove named Francis Colbert, and I got to meet Francis in 1978, I think it was, at a folk festival, and he was a reciter and a storyteller. He wrote his own recitations. His famous one is the Ballad of Job's Cove Rock, and so I was just fascinated by him. He is such an interesting guy, he's a lovely, lovely, lovely man, and I loved his accent so much. It was like he had this beautiful, I don't know, the softest. He would say, "Open the door, just go over there, Andy, and open up the door." It was this beautiful, soft, lovely, and that community of Job's Cove. You know who's from that same community? You'll hear the accent too. Is Buddy? What's his name? The other fellow.
Okay.
I'm sorry, forget his name. Too bad. Ray Johnson.
Ray Johnson.
So Ray is from the same. In fact, Francis taught him to play the accordion.
Go on.
Yeah, and so I have that little connection, which is great, and. So I spent a lot of time with him, but I loved his take on things and the way he would comment on things. He was very quiet and just would say the odd thing, so I based Uncle Val on him.
And Uncle Val, he's probably one of your more well-known characters at this point.
Yeah, probably, yeah, although I haven't done him for a while either, but yeah, he was. Yeah, and I did regular things for CBC, so I was able to make political kind of, commentary, stuff about elections and stuff like that, through the voice of Uncle Val. And so I did so many of them over the years. I did about 30 of them or something. So I was able to boil them down, and I had the Letters from Uncle Val audio CD has about 13 letters on it. But there's other ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's touch on I guess it's a newer venture for you. You've been doing it for a little bit now, but it's a more recent thing for you. You're writing children's books.
Yep.
And I have a copy of one of them, Jack in the Manger.
Yep.
And when I was living in Toronto, I would pull this book out and do readings for people, and try to put some life into it. And people loved it. I got a lot of laughs, and I want to thank you for making me look good, because it's your words.
It was meant to be read out loud.
Yes.
Definitely. In fact, I wish I had said that at the beginning of the book. And I always say, whenever I sign the book for someone, I say, please read this aloud at Christmas.
Yeah, it definitely serves that well. And Jack is a recurring character in a few books.
Yeah, every one of my books except the very first one, which was called Peg Bearskin, which I co-wrote with Philip Dinn, although it had been Jack Tales. Yep.
Okay. And he's kind of shoehorned into these stories that we already are familiar with, like the nativity. Story.
No. That was a separate. Yeah, no. Jack is the other stories are originally about Jack anyway. They were collected, with Jack in them. They were told, and they're for the international, whatever that reality is, when people tell stories all over the world, that collective unconsciousness or whatever it is of storytelling. But that's the only time I ever actually brought Jack into an existing story. So it's the story of Jesus' birth is the story, but it's from Jack's point of view. So it's because Jack is sort of everywhere and he can do anything and be in the middle of anything. He's like, Woody Allen's character Zelig. Did you ever see Zelig? That movie?
Oh, yes, the one where he turns into other people.
Yes, or even Forrest Gump. That same thing. So in this case, Jack is he's going down the road to Bethlehem, and everyone has to go back to the town they're born in. That's part of the decree, and he meets up with Mary and Joseph because he lives in a small town just outside of Bethlehem called the Mount of Pearls, right?
Wow,
and
I like that reference.
So. It's full of stuff like that, just local references, and so he has another take on it because I love that story. Like I love the Jesus birth story is just a great story, that, and it's sort of a Jack tale anyway because it's like this guy is going to be the great savior of the world. The guy who was born in the lowliest house, and doesn't even have a house to be born in. He's born in a stable, and his parents are very poor, yet. He's going to be the king of kings. And it's the same as with Jack. Jack is always the kid who is in the coal box and he's dirty and no one pays attention to him. And he is the child who is considered least likely to succeed. And he is always the one who succeeds the most. And usually he's pretty kind-hearted and generous. And that seems to stand him in good stead, like Jesus.
And he's a great example, this character for young and impressionable children.
I think so. I'm not sure. You have to talk to the folklorists, but how much we are giving lessons inside these stories and how you learn what they. I know that folklorists talk about that part of stories that is teaching you how to behave in society, stuff like that too, right?
Right.
That's another whole world I don't know much about, really. I'm not a scholar.
Not a scholar, but your writing has gotten you the Winter Set Award, the Bank of Montreal Winter Set Award, which is Atlantic Canada's richest literary prize. That was back in 2012. You won that,
right?
So that must have been a powerful motivator for you to keep going with these books.
Yes, that was the third book, and then I've written two more. I've written one more since then, and I have another one That's just about to come out. Well, I've just submitted near the last draft, so it'll be out probably in spring of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this one's called Jack and the Green Man, I believe.
Yep. So I took the Green Man. The Green Man is a whole thing. You know, you see pictures of the Green Man. It's big in England and in Europe, and he's sort of made of leaves and plants and trees and stuff like that. And there's a lot of pubs called the Green Man in England. But I also went back to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a medieval, Middle English. He's a contemporary of Chaucer's, so he would be the 1400s, I guess, 1300s, I guess. And so I took that story, which I think is the same story. It's been retold. It's very similar, but that takes place in King Arthur's court.
Okay.
And Sir Gawain is a young knight who has to go and find the Green Knight, and he has to have a sword fight with him. But it's changed. In the Newfoundland version, he has to play cards with him, right? He has to play 45s, right?
So this isn't out yet, so no one can really get out to the bookstores and
No,
read it.
you can't get this one, but it'll be out. But the latest book, which just came out at Christmas of 2014, is called Jack the King of Ashes. That's the latest one.
Awesome.
Yep.
Now for this Jack and the Green Man, maybe you can give us a little taste of it. Show a preview of it for our listeners.
Okay, so I'll just read a little bit here, and you can stop me whenever you want. So basically, which I kind of took from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This Green Man, tall, scary-looking Green Man. He's got like sort of eyes made of olives, and he's got made of leaves and trees and stuff. Shows up and he challenges someone in the community to play cards with him. And Jack, who is sort of saucy, he plays cards with him, and Jack wins the first game, and he wins $1,000. And then the second game, he plays, and he says, "Okay, let's play best 2 out of 3." He says, "What will we play for?" And Jack says, the Green Man says, "We'll play everything I own against everything you own." And Jack says, "Well, that wouldn't be very fair to you because I don't own anything except my own life." And the Green Man says, "Well, that'll do." And Jack says, "All right, you're on." So everyone's saying, "Stop, don't do this, Jack." So of course Jack loses the second game, and then he has to go, and he says, "Now," and then the Green Man says, "The third game will be played in my homeland, which is called Greenchapel. And you have to find your way there. And if you don't find your way there, then you will lose your life, because if you'll forfeit and lose your life." Okay. So Jack decides to go to find Greenchapel. That's his first big problem, right? And so Mrs. Dinn, who's this woman at the card game, says, first of all, if you want to find Greenchapel, you got to find the oldest man in the world. He'll tell you how to get to Greenchapel. "How do I find him?" says Jack. "Well," says Mrs. Dinn, "probably the best way to find is to find the oldest woman in the world. She's the oldest man's mother. I knows her well. She's a covey duck from Ladle Cove." "Beryl Covey Duck," says Jack's mother. "She taught me in school." "She taught me too," said Mrs. Dinn. "They say she was John Cabot's girlfriend." "Goodness," says Jack, "she must be some old." "She'll be 600 this Saturday," says Jack's mother. "And goodness got nothing to do with it. She's as fierce as a turkey cock, and she'll try to eat you. But if you sing her a love ballad, it'll calm her down." "That's one thing I can't do," he says. "I don't know any love ballads." "You'll come to my house tomorrow morning, Jack, and we'll teach you," says Mrs. Dinn. Sure enough, the next morning, Mrs. Dinn, Jack's father, and 40 other singers started teaching Jack to sing. They go at it for 3 days and 3 nights, and after his head is plummed with love ballads, Jack heads down the road to Ladle Cove and knocks on Mrs. Covey Duck's door. Well, the door flies off the hinges, and the old lady storms out like the Furies. She's wheezing and belching and farting, and there's lightning dancing on top of her head. Jack is cold with fright, but he starts singing. "Just walk on by, wait on the corner. I love you, but we're strangers when we meet." The old lady calms right down. Jack asks her if she knows where Greenchapel is, the home of Greensleeves. Greensleeves is the character's name.
Right.
Well, she says, I'm that old. I was Adam's girlfriend before he married what's her name? Eve, says Jack. That's the one, said Mrs. Covey Duck. And I went out with John Cabot and Christopher Columbus when they were nobodies. I heard, says Jack. But I'm sorry, she says, I can't remember Greenslade. Greensleeves, says Jack. That's the one, says Mrs. C. I'm sorry, I'm a bit weak-minded these days. There's a name for what I am, but I forget it. Addled, says Jack. That's the one, she says. Now you'll want to talk to my son. He got a young brain. He knows 10 times more than ever I knew. And once upon a time, I knew everything. But I'm obliged to tell you that he's a giant, and just so fierce as a caged mink. He'll eat the head right off you, starting at your toes. So I'll give you a Christmas pudding to calm him down. And if you give him a shave, he'll treat you like a long-lost cousin. She gives Jack a razor, a shaving brush, a pair of scissors, and she goes into her kitchen, bangs up a big plum pudding in a tin wash tub, and gives it to Jack. Roll the pudding, she says, and when it stops, you'll be at my son's. His name is Alan. Cranky Alan, they call him. Thank you, says Jack, and he walks down the front path. But don't you call him that, she sings out. Yes, ma'am, he says. He takes the pudding out of the wash tub and starts rolling it down the road.
Oh, my God. I was in stitches. That is amazing. Thank you for reading that, Andy.
No problem. That's the first reading ever of that story now.
Awesome. That's a Transparency exclusive. So that's not out until next year. When did you say?
It should be out by, I'd say, spring of 2016.
Spring 2016. So that was Jack and the Green Man. Look out for that at your local bookstores. But pick up any other of the currently available books from Andy Jones. They're all down at Broken Books. Broken Books?
Do you know Broken Books?
Do I know?
Great. Those, you know Fixed Coffee?
Oh, of course.
Right underneath that is Broken Books. So it's fixed and broken, right?
Yeah. I get it now.
Yeah, so I know a lot of young people hang around down there at by the War Memorial, and so go into Broken Books, man. It's a great store, and they're very, very, very supportive of Newfoundland stuff. They're just a wonderful store.
Awesome.
Broken Books.
I think they've popped up since I was in St. John's last, because I only moved back about 2 months ago.
Okay, yes, you missed them then. Yep.
All right, well, I'll have to check it out. Next up, we got another song from Champion Lover. It's called I See You. Once again, my name is Steve Finn here on Transparency. My guest today is Andy Jones. Stay tuned.
One
And we are back. That was I See You by Champion Lover, our featured band this evening. Those are a great group of guys. Once again, I'll mention that their music is available. Go to championlover.ca and check them out. We are in the studio with Andy Jones. This is Transparency with Steve Finn. Andy, it's been a pleasure to have you. We're coming towards the end now, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak about something that hits a little close to home. You've been an advocate for awareness of mental health as of late. The catalyst of you doing so was the loss of your son, Louis Bernard, who was
Right.
he was a close friend of mine. Unfortunately, he had taken his life a little bit of time ago, and this is something we all felt tremendously, and his absence is felt to this day. And first of all, my condolences and sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Yeah.
But you've done what you can with that, and you've made an effort to raise awareness about mental health.
Yep.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, really, to some extent, we were sadly made free by the fact that Louis died. To be able to talk about him, we couldn't talk about him when he was alive because it wasn't our place to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't well enough to talk about it himself. And as you say, he took his own life February 14th last year, and he was 28 years old. And so we were actually asked by CBC, by Ted Blades, to do an interview about it. And the reason he asked us was because he happened to come by our house, like when Louis had just died, and people were coming to visit us. My wife's family were down, and so I sat them all down in the living room and said, "Okay, guys, I'm going to tell you what has been going on with Louis, because lots of them had lost touch, over the years, like all his cousins and stuff like that." So, and at that point, Ted Blades, who I also know and who's kind of like, part of the downtown community, dropped by with some beer, like for a gift for, the crowd. And so I said, well, you might as well stay and listen to this. And so I sort of went through and I tried to, guide everybody through what had happened to Louis in the last 14 years pretty well. And I did that, and then he asked me, he said, would you be willing to say any of this on the air? And I mean, I say me, but myself and my wife both were giving this, survey of Louis' past.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went on the air, and I think that it did make a lot of people think, I don't know, hopefully it will make some difference. But, there is, no matter who is speaking about this, I think everyone would agree there is a terrible, terrible gap in services and for people who have mental illness.
I would agree.
And it seems that the root cause of that may very well be the stigma of mental illness, that people feel that it's something shameful, that it's their fault, that they are morally lacking in some way, that they're people who have children who are mentally ill think it's their fault. And there's just a general feeling that people who are vulnerable and who are weak have no one to stand up for them, therefore they don't get their fair share.
Mm-hmm.
It would be impossible to think about, for example, saying, we're just going to take all the people who are in the cancer ward and send them home and, let there be services in the community for them. I mean, people would be absolutely outraged, yet that has happened with the closing of mental hospitals. and supposedly so that, you know, they would be in the community, and it was supposed to be such a wonderful thing, but there was no money and no services when they did get in the community.
Right.
There had been mental hospitals closed. Just 2 weeks ago, there was a mental facility at the prison in New Brunswick that they closed it down. You know, and at the time when everyone's saying, you know, a large percentage of people who are in prison are actually should be in a mental hospital, not in prison, or should be being treated by mental health professionals.
That's true.
Not by prison guards.
Yeah.
You know, there are programs. You know, when the Waterford started off, the Waterford Hospital, it was like a farm place. People had jobs to do, and it was built on a European model, quite different than the rest of North America. And those programs, most of them are gone, occupational therapy programs and so on. So it's just like, and it always seems to come back to the stigma about mental illness. And I guess that seems to me to be the major problem. And even doctors, you know, have those attitudes, and they can't help themselves, and some of them don't, but some of them do. And so that's, you know, if I'm on any kind of campaign, it would be that.
Right. And I would definitely agree with, you know, that there is a stigma on mental health, talking about it. I think we need to convince people that it's not something to be ashamed of, something that you should be vocal about. Also, we need to convince people that this is more than just an attitude. It's more than just a mental state. This is a physiological ailment, and it's not something you can just simply snap out of. And the more people that understand that, the more people will respect depression and mental illness for what it really is.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's true. And that's, you know, it feels sometimes like we're far away from it, but hopefully it seems like there's a little bit of a change in the air anyway. There's some possibilities that change may happen.
I think we are making some headway.
Yeah.
And on that note, we're gonna say goodnight. Andy, it's been a pleasure having you in the studio this evening.
It was great to be here, Steve. I'm so glad to talk to you, and I'm so glad to meet someone who was a friend of my son, and to hear some stories about some good times that he had too. Thank God.
You know, I'll never forget it. You know, I haven't been living in St. John's for the past 10 years, so I probably would have seen him more if not for that. But yeah. I cherish the time I spent with Louis, and he's a remarkable lad. He was. Well, thank you. I'm glad. Glad of that. Well, my name is Steve Finn. This has been another edition of Transparency here on CHMR 93.5. Thank you again to Andy Jones for coming in. We are going to end things off with one last song from our featured band, Champion Lover. This song is called She Likes Wu-Tang. And thanks again for listening in. Good night, folks.